Hey my Patriot friends, welcome back to Colonial Girl Liz. Before we get started into today's video, make sure to comment, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to my YouTube channel, turn on your post notifications so you get notified when I post a new video. I post every Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. Let's get started with today's video. So today I'm going to be reading from a book that, well, she used to be my excuse me. This person used to be my best friend. Well, my best friend from elementary school gave me because she knew I was like a huge history fan. The Children's Book of Heroes. So, I'm going to be reading A Prayer at Valley Forge about the harsh winter at Valley Forge with Washington and his troops. So, let's get started. A Prayer at Valley Forge. The story about the Revolutionary War reminds us that in the worst of times, even great men need help. Often they look to God to find it. During the Revolutionary War, when the Americans were fighting for their freedom, the British Army captured Philadelphia. They marched into town with flags flying and bands playing and made themselves at home for the winter. The fall of Philadelphia was a great blow to the Americans, for in those days it was the capital of the new nation. But George Washington's army was not strong enough to stop the British forces. Once the king's men were inside the city, the only thing the American general could do was see that they did not get into the countryside to do any mischief. So Washington led his men at Valley Forge, a place just a few miles from Philadelphia. I've been there. You can still go there. There the American army could spend the winter. It could defeat itself if attacked, and it could keep close watch on the British. It would have been easier to fight many battles than to spend the winter in Valley Forge. It was December, and there was no shelter of any kind. The soldiers bravely set to work building huts for themselves. They made them out of whatever they could find, logs or fence rails or just mud and straw. The snow drifted in at the windows, for they had no glass. The rain dripped through the roofs. The wind howled through every crack. There were few blankets, and many men slept shivering on the hard ground. Sometimes they sat up all night crowding around the fires to keep from freezing. The clothing was worse than their shelter. The whole army was in rags. Many of the men had no shirts. Even more were without shoes. Wherever they walked, the snow was marked with their blood. Some cut strips from their precious blankets and wound about their feet to protect them from freezing ground. Food was scanty. Sometimes for several days the soldiers went without meat. Sometimes they went even without bread. Around the camp, the groans of men who were sick and starving filled the air every evening when the sun sank, and the officers wondered if the army could hold together one more day. So what this is saying that, like, basically Valley Forge in December of 1776 was very cold. It was harsh. It was a harsh winter. And when you are out at war, you don't have much. You had horses in the colonial times, obviously, but you didn't have what we have now. You don't have cell phones. You didn't have iPads. We didn't have Amazon Echoes. We didn't have any of that. And what they're basically saying is that they didn't have anything they needed, the necessities they needed to survive out in the wilderness, because they were in Pennsylvania. And when you're in Pennsylvania and you're somewhere where they were, you didn't have a lot. So you have to live with what you had. And that's why many of them, Washington's troops died, the Continental Army, because they died from suffering, cold, starvation. And sometimes at army camps in the Revolutionary War, they didn't have enough meat or food to go around to all the men, to the troops, so sometimes they just died. But unfortunately, that was war. Alright. One cold day, a Quaker farmer was walking along a creek at Valley Forge. When he heard the murmur of a solemn voice creeping in its direction, he discovered a horse tied to a tree, but no rider. The farmer stole nearer, following the sound of the voice. Through the thicket, he saw a lone man on his knees in the snow. It was General Washington. His cheeks were wet with tears as he prayed to the Almighty for help and guidance. The farmer quietly slipped away. When he reached home, he said to his wife, "Hannah, my dear, all is well. The Americans will win independence. George Washington will succeed." "What makes these think so, Isaac?" she asked. "I have heard him pray, Hannah, out in the woods today," he said. "If there is anyone on earth the Lord will listen to, it is this brave man. He will listen, Hannah. Rest assured, he will." The farmer was right. When at last the harsh winter melted away and the soft green crept over the hillsides, George Washington's army still lived. Against all odds, it had outlasted the cruel Valley Forge snows. With new hope, the patriots marched away behind their brave commander to fight the British and win their freedom. No. Okay, this is the last page. Well, so the lesson I want to teach you with this is when you're out like General Washington's Continental Army was, like the winter in 1776 at Valley Forge, it's very hard. You didn't have what we have now. I mean, even still out in war today, you still don't have, like out in Afghanistan and overseas, you don't have like what we have, where there's land and no war. But they had to survive off of meat and what they had. You couldn't go to, there were stores, but not like it is today. There were no grocery stores. There were no refrigerators. You had to go without food and sometimes meat, and that's why these men didn't go do so well and they didn't survive well, because they had no food. It's not that they had no food. They didn't have enough food to go around. So that's why they're suffering from starvation and from cold. And that's why the wounds, they have to wrap around wrap the blankets around their wounds. And that's why they didn't have a lot of blankets, because at that time the British was the most powerful army in the world. But that's it for today's video. Make sure to comment, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and turn on your post notifications so you get notified when I post a new video. I post every Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. Peace out, my Patriot friends.